Today we have the masculinity crisis, a generation of hopeless men. I'm really getting sick and tired of seeing these men hop on social media and have sassy requests from women, bruh. Like, we see men nowadays talking about, oh, how come women never approach guys in the gym? Huh? I seen a dude the other day talking about how men never receive flowers. Bro, we have to do better. I'm really gonna sit here and jack. They've been putting shit in the water, bruh.
Masculinity is in a crisis. All around the globe, creators in niches like self-improvement, the red pill, or anything else related to these categories are talking about the war on masculinity.
Why do you think there is such a crisis of masculinity?
Feminism has creeped into the mainstream like this.
Man spends his day lying in bed surrounded by screens.
You're so stupid!
And I have to admit, I don't necessarily agree with a lot of what they say. But hear me out, because what I'm suggesting isn't to disband masculinity completely. I just think we need to upgrade the way we harness its power. When I was young, I went through a similar crisis that many young teenage men are facing these days. I had absolutely no clue what it meant to really be a man. I'd see heroes and male protagonists in movies like The Dark Knight, Gladiator, and even Taken being portrayed as an unstoppable force of nature, packed with brawn, grit, and muscle. And I'd wonder if that was what I needed to aspire to be. My everyday life wasn't filled with much of the same, though. In school, most of the teachers I had growing up were women. And what the man I was closest to, my father, was really good at was encouraging me to play a bunch of sports like soccer, baseball, and hockey. Those things fueled my competitiveness and made me feel like I was tackling big accomplishments, as I thought a man should be. But when it came to the other, more personal realms of my life, I was left extremely confused. I didn't know how I should treat or talk to women, battle through hardships, and especially manage my emotions. By the end of middle school and all throughout high school, I found myself associated with the more popular guys in my grade. A group of rowdy, in-your-face partygoers who like to funnel several beers at once, be degenerates, and hook up with tons of girls. And because of everything I had seen portrayed in my life up until that point, along with the fact that I had no real sense of what it meant to be manly, I took part in these behaviors in an effort to feel more like a man. But I have to admit, a lot of the stuff we did back then, I took part in because it actually was just a really fun time. But regardless of this association and the fact that I took part in all these behaviors, I still felt like the least masculine out of all my friends. They would all.
So it seems like he's having a conversation about the idea of masculinity. Now, I'm not gonna lie. I feel like in every man's life, there's a point in time where you have to do your own deep dive. And if there's a book that I recommend for anyone to read, any guy watching this video right now, read the book, The Way of a Superior Man, bro. If you read that book, and if you read Proverbs, I know a lot of people don't want to read the Bible, but that is the greatest self-help book ever. You read Proverbs and you read The Ways of a Superior Man, that will teach you exactly how to navigate as a man, bro. How to be stoic and how to actually manage your emotions. And not be like these little fruit cups, bruh. These little fruity goobers, bro.
I have such an easy time talking to girls and sleeping with them. They would get into fights at parties when I didn't want to, and they even did better in school and some sports than me. And nothing made me feel like less of a man than not being able to get hard for almost an entire year with every girl I tried to sleep with in college. All of these traditionally masculine traits I was trying to embody, dominance, aggression, competitiveness, and power, were only leading me to feel more depressed and less masculine because I could not fully embrace them. And in a world where 3 out of every 4 people
that right there is what we call toxic masculinity, where you try to overcompensate because you feel like you're not adequate enough,
choose to stop living are men, we have to ask this crucial question. What parts of traditional masculinity are making men no longer want to live, that make men feel worse rather than better, and what parts of traditional masculinity genuinely help men live better lives for themselves and those around them? There isn't going to be a straight answer that will apply to every single man out there, but today I'm going to try and tackle this question as comprehensively as I can. First, we need to identify what masculinity even is in the traditional sense. Masculinity is a set of traits or attributes that are regarded as characteristic of men. But you can see anyone exude masculine characteristics, not just men. We've already gone over 4 traits commonly associated with masculinity, which are dominance, power, aggression, and competitiveness, but I want to combine and add these to 3 core masculine traits that I want to go over in detail. And those 3 traits are strength, assertiveness, and leadership. So let's start by going over what is touted as the golden trait of masculinity: strength. And I'm not just talking about physical strength. I'm talking about being mentally strong as well. If you're a frequent viewer of my channel, it's likely you've come across these reject modernity, embrace masculinity videos on YouTube. They all follow the same formula. Start by showing some weak men doing modern things like eating too much junk food, putting on dresses on TikTok, or simping over Twitch streamers, followed by what you should really be. Athletes or competitive fighters. All activities that require some sort of physical prowess. I'm not gonna lie to you, a lot of these videos are incredibly inspiring. When I put one of these on before my workout, then blast some hardstyle while pretending I'm one of those icons from the video, it gives me a huge boost of motivation and strength. But as with any masculinity message, I think the whole idea behind being stronger can be misconstrued and also just be toxic. You see, physical strength is usually determined by a couple key factors: testosterone and muscle. Something positive that I think these videos indirectly underlines is the importance of bringing to awareness the declining testosterone rates in men for the past few decades. Testosterone is something that is closely intertwined with masculinity. It makes men feel more energetic, it makes them want to go after what they want, and it makes them generally happier. There's no doubt that the decline in testosterone rates could be one of the reasons for depression being on the rise in men, as low testosterone and being depressed are highly correlated. This indirect intention—
Bro, I'm not even joking about what I said at the beginning of the video. I genuinely feel like they're putting these high levels of estrogen in food. I'm not even joking. All this GMO shit that we eat, the McDonald's, the frozen shit, the milk, all of that stuff has soy in it, bruh. That's what really starts to decrease. Have you ever noticed how men are acting more feminine and women are acting more masculine, bruh? Do you think that's a coincidence? Like, realistically speaking, what happens is the estrogen levels that women consume causes them to stop producing their own estrogen. So it ends up becoming more of testosterone. Same thing for men. You consume more estrogen, you act softer, you act more feminine.
That one should boost their testosterone and have more strength and vigor for life from these masculinity videos, I believe is a big positive. Good, clean dieting and consistent exercise is appearing to become less and less valued, at least in American culture. But let's dive deeper into this whole idea behind being physically strong. A lot of these videos only depict people who are extremely muscular and massive. For a young, impressionable teenager, this is what the ideal man is for them. Screw anything else. If they can just be massive and muscular, then people will respect them for how manly they are. But I disagree with the idea that having a more muscular physique makes you more of a man. If you are pursuing a strong aesthetic body because you want to be able to tower over people and dominate them and have people be intimidated by you, you are subconsciously telling yourself that you are afraid to have any vulnerable points. You are only pursuing a better body in a pursuit to cover up your past traumas and insecurities and suppress them at all costs. Because many men are taught to do just that. This is why you can be the—
But at the same time, understand that you can go to the gym and pursue that dream physique to not try to suppress that trauma, that insecurity, but to overcome it. Like, a lot of people think that they have to identify with their trauma. You can choose consciously to change the past by creating a better future. That's not suppressing. That's called improving.
Most physically dominant man in the room, but still be the weakest in every other area. And when that is the case, you are just as fragile as the man who has no muscles and the same amount of insecurities. This is a part of traditional masculinity that I feel needs to be updated. I feel like a lot of young guys stop themselves from pursuing something that they would enjoy, that would be a benefit to their lives, such as being a singer, a writer, or something typically associated as a more feminine career, because they think society would value them less and it wouldn't be masculine of them to do so. Now, as a man, you'd want to assure that you are at the very least physically competent. If you have no sort of strength or ability to move things and be agile and you're obese, you should want to do something about it because it's probably contributing to your lack of energy and happiness. But you shouldn't have to strive for this very unrealistic ideal that's often portrayed in the media or online in order to feel masculine. Whether you're a soccer player, engineer, programmer, skater, writer, singer, or the like, you are no less of a man than the guy with six-pack abs from the Reject Modernity videos. And luckily, a few of these videos actually portray men in other roles other than being super dominant, muscular, and masculine sometimes. Oh, but Cole, why do you lift weights then? Well, it's engraved into who I am at this point. I love the way it makes me feel, I like the challenge that comes with getting stronger, and I want to be able to carry all my groceries from my car in one trip. Oh, also not to mention the fact that a lot of these Reject Modernity, Embrace Masculinity videos are blatantly homophobic and LGBTQ phobic, which is something I really don't with. Putting down people like that in that way makes you much less of a man than more of it. The even more controversial aspect of strength in men. Mental strength. This is one of the most widely misunderstood parts of what it means to be masculine. I remember when I was a teenager and I was out to dinner with my parents and my sister, and we were talking about how my sister was working through some sort of relationship issue. My mom was suggesting seeking some sort of help, and I was agreeing, and we ended up talking about how great it is that there are so many resources now for those struggling with their mental health. As a response, my dad said something along the lines of, "We used to just tell people to get over it," and it worked too. This, I feel, encapsulates a part of traditional masculinity that has caused decades of generational trauma in men. When men are taught that being mentally strong means being able to bottle up your emotions and get rid of them somehow, they are more likely to be depressed, hopeless, commit violent crimes, and be verbally and physically abusive. The problem is, this aspect is really confusing. We're told that society will take advantage of and disdain men for being emotional, and we're also taught that women don't want an emotional man. So if we're not supposed to show our emotions, but the very fact that we don't show our emotions makes us more out of touch with ourselves and therefore leads us to do negative things, what is a man to do? The answer is not as clear as I'd like it to be. The paradoxical thing that I've realized is that in order to establish more emotional control and maturity, and therefore be less emotional, you must find a way to feel and express your emotions somehow. Now, knowing when to do this is really the most important part. There are some situations in which people will take advantage of you if you're being super emotional. For example, if you're super depressed and repeatedly crying about how you hate your life in front of your girlfriend or some girl that you're interested in, and that woman has not yet established a strong bond with you, or her emotional intelligence and maturity is quite low, then yes, she's probably gonna lose attraction for you. But if you're with, let's say, one or both of your parents who you know won't judge you, and you just need to let it out and get everything off your chest, then you should absolutely do it. Because nothing gets resolved or healed by suppressing it, and that's what a lot of us men were taught to do in order to cope with our more emotional side.
I genuinely believe you have one chance to genuinely express how you feel to a woman. If you're ever going through something in life, only one chance. Use it wisely, because that right there is going to dictate the type of woman that you're dealing with. If you express yourself in a vulnerable moment and she starts to look at you funny, she starts to lose respect for you and question your judgment, then you know that this is not the girl that you're meant to be with. If you do confess, if you do get into that vulnerable moment, you cry, you express yourself, and she accepts it for who you are, never let it happen again, bro. Take that to the shower, take it to your parents, take it to the friends, take it to whoever you have to. But realistically speaking, in order to maintain your masculine frame, masculine meaning certain, masculine meaning not allowing your emotions to take control of the decisions that you're making. Not about the crying and not about the being open and vulnerable. Sure, do that. But never break down in front of her. She will lose respect for you. Naturally. The same way that if a woman starts to act masculine in front of a man, I'm sure that you will stop feeling attracted to your girl if she starts to act more and more like a nigga. I think we can all agree on that. The same way that you feel about that is the same way she feels about it. If you start to act more and more feminine, more and more like a woman, she's going to lose respect for you, bro. I could guarantee that.
From a young age. Again, I think this is where traditional masculinity falls short. It's very disappointing to me to still see so many teenagers and adults making fun of men for showing their emotions. Part of it definitely comes from these beliefs about what it means to be a man and what's acceptable as a man that's been passed down for generations in society, but part of it is also due to most people still being controlled by their more primitive brain areas, which is something I'm gonna bring up repeatedly throughout this video. When humans were fighting for their survival every day, they knew that if they stuck to the people who could be fearless and stoic in the face of danger, they'd have a better chance of surviving. And so people naturally gravitated towards and were attracted to the people that looked like they had their together at all times. Many of us are still functioning on that same primitive level, which is very advantageous for survival, but is lacking in empathy and self-discovery. We need to start to get to the point as a society to break past these more primitive level brain areas, allow men to speak up, and get the help they need from other men or anyone else without being so heavily judged. Because when we allow this to happen, it creates what I believe to be a truly good man. Emotionlessness is not the masculinity we should be aspiring towards. Emotional maturity is. And that only comes when we can find and create more safe spaces for men to talk about these massive expectations that are put on them to either be happy or emotionless, make tons of money, have a muscular physique, and be able to dominate everything and everyone in order to be a man. So in short, being mentally strong isn't about showing no emotions or only showing the emotions of dominance, power, and aggressiveness. It's about not letting your emotions be bottled up so that they don't come out in the many different forms of abuse, like bullying, self-harm, and domestic violence, and coming more in tune to your emotional needs that are closely associated with the more feminine aspects of nature, like the need to be nurtured, cared for, and understood. Again, I've found a very paradoxical thing to happen when you start to do this. When you learn to harness the more feminine aspects of your human nature, your ability to battle adversity and tough times actually gets stronger, which is counterintuitive to what we've been taught. Like, dude, it's okay to want a hug. It's okay to not be okay. Find a healthy way to open up about what you're going through, and I promise you, your ability to remain more masculine in the good ways will significantly improve. All right, we've tackled the biggest core trait. Now let's...
I genuinely believe that yes, as a man, you should be able to open up to a handful of people. If you need a therapist, definitely hire a therapist. If you have that one close friend, if you have your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, you have that one person, that one rock that you can go to and express yourself, 110% express yourself. But at the same time, I feel like men do need to come to an understanding that we are men, that by nature, we are human who have human brains. In other words, that primal mentality that he was referring to is never going to go anywhere, bro. Women are attracted to certain things the same way men are attracted to certain things. And that is just our biology. That is just how we are engineered and hardwired. So the best way to overcome the idea of pressure as a man is to just come to terms with that's what it is. Genuinely speaking. For me, I know for a fact, I want a woman who's soft, who's submissive. I want to be able to have a woman who takes care of certain things, who knows her role. The same way as a man, I know mine. I'm not going to complain about the hardships of being a provider. I'm not going to complain about the hardships of being a protector. That's my role as a man. And I'm going to walk into that confidently knowing who I am, rather than letting my emotions, not saying I'm going to bottle them up or suppress them, but I am going to acknowledge them and I'm going to release them in the way that I see most effective. But at the same time, men have these ideas nowadays where, well, I shouldn't have to pay the bills. We should be going 50-50. No, you shouldn't, bruh. You should step into the role of leadership.
Move on to assertiveness. If you want to be masculine, you have to assert yourself in this world. You want to be able to say, this is what I want and this is how I'm going to get it. And you never want to be dishonest to yourself and others about what it is you want and need. But the way in which much of traditional masculinity approaches how to be more assertive isn't even really assertiveness. It's much more attuned to being passive aggressive or actively aggressive. You see, on the two sides of the spectrum, we have assertiveness and passiveness. Someone who is passive is a massive people pleaser. They always put other people's needs in front of theirs. They're emotionally dishonest in an effort to not offend anyone. They are indirect with their words and they overly apologize. This is the very opposite of what someone who is confident and emotionally mature, aka a man, does. Next to that is passive aggressiveness. When you are passive aggressive, you are still being emotionally dishonest and indirect with your actions and words, but instead you are subtly making it clear that your rights and needs needs prevail over others. A good example of this is someone who gaslights you for not doing what they want, and they make you question whether you're doing the right thing or if you're actually a good person. If they say things like, "Don't you think you're overreacting a little?" or "It wasn't even a big deal, you're just being emotional," they're being passive aggressive. Again, this is not really something that most people would regard as traditionally masculine, but it gets closer to the line of traditional masculinity in that it puts your needs and wants above everyone else's. Then there's the traditional masculine aggression. This is when you are direct and honest, even if it's inappropriate and severely hurts others, you attack and blame others, and you do whatever it is you want to do and get whatever you want to get at the expense of others. This type of masculine energy comes out when you haven't developed your emotional maturity and you were taught at a young age to dominate over everyone and always put yourself first, which is what a lot of young guys with an old father figure are taught. Again, this is coming from our more primitive brain areas that see everything as a battle for survival. But the repeating problem with the primitive brain areas is that although they are incredibly useful, they rarely take into account other people's rights and needs and only optimize for the ego's survival. This is not how masculinity should be. True healthy assertiveness takes into account the rights and needs of everyone involved. The goal is not to ignore and disrespect others, as some teachers of traditional masculinity suggest, but to allow them to communicate and for you to be empathetic of their beliefs and needs while sticking to your own beliefs and needs. You want to be direct and honest, not manipulative and hostile. You want to be flexible but firm with your decisions. So assertiveness is an excellent trait for any man to develop, so long as it isn't done in an overly aggressive, unempathetic way. And by virtue of being considerate and empathetic, dominance no longer becomes the main masculine goal. Now, if we're talking about what women like in bed and whether you should be dominant in that realm of life, that's a different story and varies from woman to woman. Lastly, we have the final core trait of masculinity: leadership. More often than not, men have this innate desire to want to help to build upon something and improve. We want to feel like we're purposefully contributing and leading something, and if it's not anything outside of us, then at the very least, leading ourselves. It's why the vast majority of self-improvement channels are male-dominated, and I think it explains why around 90% of the people who watch my videos are men. But I have to wonder, how much of men's strong desire to want to be better, improve, and lead comes from a genuine innate desire, and how much of it is societal pressure telling us that that's what makes us a man? The problem with this is it's just not possible for every single person in the world to be a leader. Think about something like an army, corporation, or sports team. Would these things run effectively if every single male on it was trying to lead and be seen as a leader? No, it wouldn't. Of course, men tend to have more qualities associated with being a good leader, like being assertive, protective, and providing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every single man is going to find themselves in a leadership role. This idea that we're all in a competition with one another to dominate one another, while as true as it might be in some areas of life, can do a lot of harm if a man is basing his entire worth on whether he's in a leadership role or not. And much of traditional masculinity assumes that a truly worthy masculine man is leading an entire tribe of individuals, is providing for an entire family, or is a big-time CEO or entrepreneur. Until you achieve one or more of these things, then you cannot be considered a man. Again, this is an outdated concept. You should want to improve yourself. You should want to stop distracting yourself with an abundance of comfort and pleasure and do challenging things that aren't instantly gratifying. But you don't need to dominate and be above everyone and everything around you. So, what am I trying to get at with all this? The solution to this generation's current problems isn't to revert back to past tradition, it's to focus on simply being a good person who can stop the cycle of generational trauma passed on to us from previous generations by not being so tied down by a singular masculine ideal. It blows my mind how many people think that going back to past traditions can help us solve present day problems. And forcing people to marry again or be a very particular type of man or woman or have a nuclear family, these things aren't going to magically make everything better. Traditional values and forcing people to live a very certain life and be a certain person in order to have value are what led the world, and specifically men, to start feeling like they no longer want to exist in the first place. No, what we need is to transcend the idea of traditional masculinity entirely. Whether you're a man or a woman, we all need to stop being so controlled by our primal desires and harness them for good instead of let them run rampant and abuse, mistreat, and look down upon others. It doesn't mean we start demonizing masculine traits and feminizing men, because truly healthy masculine traits like providing for others, building things, getting mentally and physically stronger, being honest and assertive are an incredible benefit to society. It means we scrap the idea of the 1% ideal high-value man archetype and instead focus on how each person individually can come to adopt and develop these traits in their own way. Men, you are no less of a man.
See, the only problem with that is we're living in a world, like, once again, we have people who are dressing in women's clothing, painting their nails and wearing makeup, trying to say that I'm still a man and I'm still masculine. I just express myself outwardly as a woman. Huh? So I get what he's trying to say, honestly speaking, y'all. But I do think that there's a level of the traditional idea of masculinity that should be maintained. And the reason why I recommended reading The Way of a Superior Man and Proverbs is because those two books give a great foundation of what a masculine man actually is. Without being toxic, without doing all of these unnecessary things, it's really more so about your mindset, 100% your level of stoicism, which includes your emotional and mental maturity, as well as your moral compass that you abide by. But there are a lot of people in this world who try to conform to this new age masculinity where you can just say whatever you want and feel however you want, and you don't have to take care of shit. You could just be who you want because you're a human being. You're ruining masculinity. That is the masculinity crisis. It's literally an attack on masculinity. We have so many different things that are emasculating men on a daily basis. And I feel like a lot of the, not a lot, but a few of the things that he said in this video definitely can be perceived as contributing to the emasculation of men, in my opinion. I think that a man should 100% try to maintain his stoic figure. If he's going through something in life, 100% he should feel able to express it and not bottle it up. But how you express it really does matter, not only for the perception of other people, but also on how you perceive yourself. If every single day you cry, you're not going to have the same level of assertiveness or confidence that you would have if you learned how to express those emotions other than crying. Nothing wrong with crying, but it's how you express your emotions that says a lot about who you are as a man. And I feel like those are the conversations that aren't had. I feel like a lot of men don't grow up with father figures, and therefore they never have a clear example, which is the reason why you should find somebody that you most admire, not try to be like them, but study their moral values. What do they believe? What do they support? What ideologies do they share? And that is what you should be modeling yourself after. Not copying, not trying to be like Andrew Tate because he calls himself the top G. But in terms of maintaining the role of who you are as a man and understanding what you're supposed to provide. Yes, supposed to provide. Supposed to. This is what you're supposed to provide as a man. Accept it and embrace it, and then be the best version of yourself possible. That's literally what masculinity is. But I'm going to end this video here. If you guys did enjoy, make sure to leave a like down below and subscribe. I'm going to catch you guys in the next one, man. Peace.